Artists clash over backlash. Outrage erupts over anti-Semitic art exhibition in Margate after visitor claims she was driven out. A controversial art exhibition in Margate has sparked widespread backlash after a Jewish visitor alleged she was verbally attacked and forced to leave following a confrontation with the artist over imagery she described as anti-Semitic and reminiscent of Nazi propaganda. Now we take a deeper look and break down this entire story on the AI podcast.
We usually treat an art gallery like almost like a Faraday cage.
Oh, yeah, like a sanctuary.
Exactly. You step inside, the heavy glass doors close behind you, and all those chaotic, noisy signals of the outside world are supposed to be completely blocked out.
Right.
The pristine white walls, the track lighting, it's all basically designed to isolate you with the artwork, to create this safe sort of contemplative distance where you can just think.
Just you and the canvas.
Yeah. But what happens when that Faraday cage just utterly fails? What happens when the outside world doesn't just leak into the gallery, but violently short-circuits the entire room?
Well, I mean, at that point, it ceases to be a gallery. It becomes a proxy battleground for whatever geopolitical conflict just forced its way through the front doors.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We are so glad you're here with us.
Yes, really glad to have you here.
We have a fascinating and honestly incredibly tense stack of recent reporting in front of us concerning an exhibition in Margate in the UK.
It's a really intense situation.
It is. We are going to explore a physical confrontation that erupted right on the floor of a gallery, pulling in local visitors, the artists, and eventually, national politicians.
Yeah.
It is a story about the explosive intersection of political art, freedom of expression, and deeply serious accusations of anti-Semitism.
It is, without a doubt, one of the most complex webs of historical trauma and modern civic responsibility that we've looked at. Because, this controversy is inextricably linked to the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict.
Right.
The emotions and the stakes involved here are just incredibly raw.
Which is exactly why, before we get into the actual mechanisms of what happened in Margate, we really need to explicitly state the ground rules for how we are going to navigate this today.
Absolutely essential.
Because the source material we are working from deals with highly charged political realities. It involves heavy accusations of racism, historical trauma, and honestly, profound pain.
Yeah, real human pain.
So we want to make it unequivocally clear to you listening. Neither of us is taking a side here.
What at all?
We are not endorsing the viewpoints of the artist, we are not endorsing the viewpoints of the critics, and we are not validating the actions of the visitors or the crowds involved.
Right.
Our sole purpose today is to impartially report and analyze the ideas, the claims, and the events exactly as they are described in the reporting we have in front of us.
Precisely. Our role is strictly analytical.
Yeah.
We are here to help you understand the anatomy of this controversy.
Roadies,
We want to break down how a local arts event spiraled into a national incident. And to do that, well, we have to start by looking at the space and the specific visual vocabulary that really lit the match.
Okay, let's unpack this. The exhibition at the center of the storm is titled Drawings Against Genocide.
Right.
It was created by an artist named Matthew Collings. And the reporting really zeroes in on a very specific set of images that immediately drew the ire of critics.
Yeah, and the details here matter.
They really do. According to the sources, Collings repeatedly utilized the Star of David, placing it around figures that are explicitly portrayed as Israelis, as well as figures labeled as members of a Jewish lobby.
And we really need to pause on that specific pairing, the imagery and the text, because it is the mechanical core of the critics' accusations.
Right, the heart of the issue.
Exactly. The Star of David is, it's the primary universal symbol of Judaism and Jewish identity.
Yeah.
And yes, it is the central feature of the Israeli flag, but it predates the modern state of Israel by centuries as a religious and cultural identifier.
Right. It represents a global people, not just a specific nation state.
Exactly. And when you take that universal religious symbol and visually pair it with the phrase Jewish lobby, you are tapping into a very specific, very old historical mechanism.
Yeah, the conspiracy trope.
Yes, the concept of a shadowy, disproportionately powerful Jewish lobby controlling government finance or foreign policy is frankly one of the oldest anti-Semitic tropes in existence.
Wow.
The critics cited in our sources argue that by combining the Star of David with this specific trope, the artist isn't offering some nuanced critique of the Israeli government's military policies. They argue he has crossed a definitive line into utilizing racist caricatures.
But wait, I want to push back on that for a second, just playing devil's advocate based on the nature of the art world.
Okay, go for it.
Isn't the whole point of political art to be provocative?
I mean, historically, sure.
Right. Like, if an artist's stated goal is to shock the public into paying attention to a geopolitical crisis, and in this case, we have an exhibition literally titled Drawings Against Genocide, couldn't someone argue that making the audience deeply uncomfortable is exactly the mechanism he was aiming for?
That's a valid artistic argument.
Because art isn't supposed to be polite, right?
Right, and that is the classic defense of avant-garde political art, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the counter-argument presented by the critics in the text is that provocation still operates within boundaries of historical context. What's fascinating here is the massive chasm between the artist's stated intent and the audience's reception. The critics are essentially arguing that the medium corrupts the message entirely.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Because if you are trying to claim the moral high ground against violence, but you use visual language that has historically been used to justify violence against Jewish people, well, your stated message is voided. You cannot separate the symbol from its historical body count.
Right. And you know, that tension didn't just stay on the canvas, it completely altered the physical environment of the room.
It really did.
The sources describe an atmosphere on a particular Saturday that was a far cry from quiet contemplation.
A total shift.
Witnesses use words like ugly and aggressive to describe the ecosystem of the venue. And it wasn't just the paintings causing this.
Yeah, it was the attendees too.
Exactly. The text notes that attendees were walking around wearing T-shirts that read, "Globalize the Intifada."
Yeah.
While video footage actually showed Collings himself standing in front of a sign reading, "Resistance until liberation."
Which is where we see the concept of context collapse happening in real time.
Wow, yeah.
The gallery is no longer a neutral space holding controversial art. The physical space itself becomes highly partisan. And we have to explain the mechanism behind why a phrase like globalize the Intifada is so intensely alarming to the critics in the sources.
Because it's not just viewed as, like, a catchy protest slogan.
Right. Historically, the first and second Intifadas were periods of intense, sustained Palestinian uprisings against Israel.
Okay.
But specifically, the Second Intifada in the early 2000s involved a heavy campaign of suicide bombings targeting civilian infrastructure. So, buses, cafes, restaurants.
Right. Terrible violence.
Exactly. So when critics and Jewish advocacy groups see globalize the Intifada on a T-shirt in Margate, they don't interpret it as a call for peaceful global political resistance.
Right.
They interpret it as a literal, historical endorsement of violence against Jewish civilians now being invited into their local community.
Which fundamentally changes the dynamic of walking into that room.
Oh, absolutely.
You aren't just looking at a painting you disagree with. You're surrounded by people wearing slogans that you perceive as a direct threat to your physical safety.
Yes.
And that actually brings us to Zoe Strimple. She is a Jewish writer who visited the exhibition on that Saturday, and according to her very detailed, very emotional account in the sources, she actually tried to initiate a dialogue with the artist.
Yeah, she walked right into that deeply charged environment and approached Matthew Collings directly.
Which takes some nerve.
Definitely. Her stated goal was to express her profound concern that the imagery he was using resembled Nazi-style propaganda.
And based on her account, the idea of a civil artistic debate just evaporated instantly.
It broke down immediately.
She alleges that Collings became immediately hostile, shouting and actively interrupting her attempts to speak calmly.
Right.
But it's the specific language he allegedly used that I found so revealing about how modern discourse breaks down. She claims he dismissed her concerns by calling them Hasbara talking points.
And that specific dismissal is a vital mechanism to understand here.
Yeah, what does that actually mean?
Well, Hasbara is a Hebrew word that roughly translates to explaining.
Okay.
But in the context of modern geopolitics, it is frequently used by critics to describe pro-Israel state propaganda or coordinated public relations.
So by deploying that word against a gallery visitor, what is he actually doing in that moment?
He is allegedly stripping her of her individual agency.
Wow.
Yeah. In that interaction, he is no longer treating her as Zoe Strimple, a local Jewish woman who was personally offended by a piece of art.
Right. She just becomes a symbol.
Exactly. By labeling her genuine emotional reaction as Hasbara, he fundamentally transforms her into an avatar for a foreign state, Her personal trauma is dismissed as a coordinated bad faith political tactic.
That is so dismissive.
It is. He also allegedly accused her of defending what he termed genocide, which further entrenches the idea that they aren't having a conversation, they're just firing ideological mortars at each other.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Strimple's account notes a specific response from Collings that essentially ended any chance of a shared reality.
Yeah, this part was striking.
When she explicitly referenced the shadow of Nazi ideology in his artwork, Collings reportedly replied, "Why do you think it's there? Israel are the Nazis."
That alleged quote is the absolute distillation of this entire conflict. It employs a rhetorical device known as Holocaust inversion.
Let's explore how that works, because it's cited in the sources as a major point of contention.
So Holocaust inversion is the act of taking the ultimate historical trauma experienced by Jewish people, the Holocaust, and weaponizing it against them or against the modern state of Israel.
Right.
It is highly inflammatory because it doesn't just criticize a government's actions, it equates the descendants of victims with their historical exterminators.
That is incredibly heavy.
Yeah. For the critics cited in the reporting, this isn't just offensive. It is a calculated cruelty designed to inflict maximum psychological pain.
And as this intense, incredibly painful verbal altercation is happening, the room doesn't just sit idly by. The psychology of the crowd shifts dramatically.
Yeah, the atmosphere just turns.
According to Strimple, the people in the gallery began to turn on her. They started booing.
Right.
They physically encroached on her space, moving closer.
Yeah.
And people started pulling out their phones, taking photos of her while she was being shouted at.
It's a textbook example of crowd intimidation.
Totally.
When an ideological threat is identified in a highly charged room, the physiological response of the group is often to purge the threat. Taking photos isn't just about documenting the event. It's a modern intimidation tactic.
Like saying, "We're watching you."
Exactly. It says, "We see you, we are recording you, and you are not welcome here." It effectively forced her out of the physical space.
Strimple mentioned that before she was forced out, she threatened to call the police and the Community Security Trust.
Yeah, the CST.
For those listening who might not be familiar with the UK landscape, our sources define the CST as a charity that monitors antisemitism and provides physical security for the Jewish community. Like, they guard synagogues and community centers.
Right. And according to Strimple, when she invoked the name of an organization whose sole purpose is to protect Jewish people from hate crimes, the crowd's response was mockery.
That detail really stuck with me. It signifies a total breakdown of civic empathy. But you'd think a local gallery dispute in Margate would stay local.
You would think.
However, the sheer vitriol of this interaction acted like a lightning rod. The digital age guarantees that local context collapse immediately becomes a national proxy war.
The fallout was incredibly swift. I mean, the exhibition was referred to the police following multiple complaints from the public.
Wow.
But then you see high-profile national figures stepping into the fray. You have actress Tracy Ann Oberman publicly condemning the incident as disgusting.
Right.
Michael Gove, a major political figure, called the situation truly terrible.
And then there is the incredibly stark assessment from author Alex Hearn, who alleged that this artwork actively promotes racist tropes. He stated that it portrays Jews as blood-soaked, baby-eating demons.
That visceral language really shows that critics didn't just view this as an artist making a clumsy political statement. They viewed it as the mainstreaming of dangerous historical propaganda.
Exactly. But amidst all of this high-level geopolitical debate, there is a structural, bureaucratic element in the sources that I find absolutely fascinating.
Oh, the involvement of the Thanet District Council.
Yes. The sources report that the local council had actually listed this exhibition on a regional tourism website.
Right.
And suddenly, local critics and national watchdogs are demanding answers from these municipal workers, asking why they are involved in promoting what they view as anti-Semitic hate speech.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where the Margate incident becomes a vital case study for how modern governance operates or fails to operate under the weight of global conflicts.
Yeah, totally.
We have to look at the bureaucratic mechanism here. A local district council is primarily concerned with municipal housekeeping.
Right.
We are talking about fixing potholes, managing waste collection, and running local tourism boards to boost the regional economy.
Right. I imagine they just have an automated web form where local galleries submit their opening hours and a brief description of their upcoming shows.
Exactly.
Some junior web editor probably just hits approve to populate the weekend calendar.
That's usually how it works.
Yeah.
It is designed to be a frictionless bureaucratic process.
Yeah.
But when that frictionless process collides with a highly volatile international conflict, the results are catastrophic for the local government.
Oh, for sure.
Because in the arena of geopolitical optics, a listing on a municipal tourism website is no longer viewed as an automated calendar update. It is interpreted as state endorsement.
The council suddenly looks like they are officially sponsoring the event.
Precisely. And local councils are entirely unequipped to adjudicate these issues. They do not have a Department of Foreign Affairs.
No, of course not.
They do not have historians on staff to evaluate whether a specific juxtaposition of a geopolitical slogan and a religious symbol constitutes avant-garde political resistance or a violation of international hate speech laws.
Right.
Yet, because they own the digital real estate where the event was listed, they are suddenly thrust into the center of a diplomatic crisis, forced to defend their bureaucratic processes against accusations of systemic racism.
It really highlights how vulnerable our everyday civic infrastructure is to these massive global shockwaves.
It does. It shows that the traditional boundaries that used to insulate local communities from international conflicts simply do not exist anymore.
So what does this all mean for you listening today?
That's the real question.
Even if you live thousands of miles away from the UK, and even if you haven't set foot in an art gallery in years, the incident in Margate is a glaring example of how global conflicts are hyper-localizing. The battle lines of massive historical wars are filtering down into our hometowns. They are forcing everyday people, local writers, gallery owners, municipal web developers, and town councils to navigate incredibly blurred lines.
That's a lot of pressure on local systems.
It really is. You might find that the arbiters of free speech and the judges of what constitutes hate in your own backyard aren't Supreme Court justices. They are your local zoning boards and arts councils who are desperately trying to figure it out on the fly.
It forces us to confront a really difficult reality about how we communicate. I mean, if art inherently relies on symbols to convey complex ideas,
Right.
but the audience interpreting those symbols views them as objectively harmful historical weapons, who ultimately holds the power?
That is the big question.
Who gets to definitively define what a piece of political art actually means? Is it the creator's stated intent, regardless of how oblivious or provocative it might be?
Right.
Or does the ultimate meaning belong to the community standing in front of the canvas who genuinely feels threatened by what they see?
It certainly shatters the illusion of the gallery as a Faraday cage, doesn't it? The pristine white walls can only contain so much before the outside world breaks through.
It always breaks through eventually.
We'll leave you to mull that over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Okay, one question for you. How should society draw the line between legitimate political criticism of a nation like Israel and imagery of narratives that cross into anti-Semitic stereotypes, especially in artistic spaces that claim freedom of expression? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.